Blog Talk Radio.
Welcome to Institute for Personal Development, where total consciousness is the new frontier. Kriya Yoga is the union of the individual with the divine. Join us as we explore the practices that initiate this process.
Good morning. Welcome to the Voice of Yoga. Let's talk consciousness. I am your hostess, Lisa Winton, and with me is Kenny Toy, also known as Swami Jayananda, founder of Institute for Personal Development, located here in Hampton, New Hampshire. Well, good morning, Swami. Thank you for being here today. How are you?
I'm doing pretty well. How about you?
I'm doing great, too. Thank you. Well, thank you, listeners, for tuning in. Today on the Voice of Yoga, we will talk about the full moon in Leo that was actually last night, February 3rd. This full moon is conjunct Jupiter, trine Uranus, and inconjunct Pluto. What the new moon promises, the full moon delivers. So be careful what you ask for. When the moon and sun are in opposition, it is an opportunity to see things from two different sides or perspectives. So look before you leap and be sure to take consideration for consequences. Not everything is what we think it might be. Don't be fooled by appearances. A good time to see the interplay between matter, mind, and spirit. Learn how creation is taking place in accordance with the law of opposites. How we think is what we become. So, Swami, get us started. What should we learn from this full moon?
Well, did you happen to see it last night, the moon conjunct Jupiter? Because I know here in Hampton it was just a very crisp, clear night, and the moon, was very visible, and you could see Jupiter right alongside of it. And I always think of one of the things Thoreau used to say was, humility, like darkness, reveals the heavenly lights. Like the night sky is so different from the day sky that when the bright light of the sun goes down, then, the reflection of the sunlight on all of those celestial bodies that are in the heavens, and also the stars that have their own light pouring down. But the planets and they require the light of the sun. They're reflecting the light of the sun, and that's how they become visible to us. But the sky was just pristine last night, and so and we were talking about what are the opportunities that come with this, the whole thing of the moon in Leo and the sun in Aquarius, and what we talked about here, that this interplay between matter, mind, and spirit, and how creation is taking place in accordance with these laws of opposites. I think it's a really important principle to have a handle on in order to really grasp the work that we do here. It's one of the reasons why theory is such an important part of our yoga practice. It's, you learn tools, but you also have to learn tasks. They're designed to do something. And the whole sense of Leo is all about what we talked about in one of the earlier Kriya Yoga Spiritual Advance series, was the development of a healthy ego. That the mystic has a strong sense of self. And it's not a loss of self-conscious awareness. That the spiritual experience, the mystical experience, is not a loss of self-conscious awareness. It's a more inclusive point of identification. So it is the union of the individual with the divine that initiates this progressive cycle, where matter and mind come together with new information. And that's what starts this progressive cycle, where the conscious mind, the sense of self, starts to expand. It starts to transcend the limits of just seeing ourselves as separate entities. And so a configuration like the sky last night is a really pristine opportunity to try and start to grasp this concept, that reality is multidimensional, that things are happening on different levels simultaneously. And if you are inclined, I think learning a little bit about quantum physics will help you substantiate that most of this isn't belief, but it is science, that underlying matter is energy, and underlying energy is the void or the nothing. And so, for some reason there has been this split between science and religion, when in fact, that has been the downfall of humanity since it has happened, to the point, where we now almost outlaw our religions. And they're not, we don't really understand them as something that is necessary in this development of the human being, where in fact it is the only way that we do it. And that's a big part of what we do, is we're educating people how to understand the physics of spirituality, understand that this isn't a belief system, but it's instruction to do something. It has an evidence procedure. And this concept of a concealed deity, this concept of God, isn't something that you choose to believe in or not. That God is not something you believe in, but it is the force right now that is supporting our lives. It is something that is ever present. And if you can join your sense of identity with it, then something magical starts to happen to this human being. It's that matter and mind come together with a different source of sustenance. And when that happens, then your sense of self actually starts to evolve. It starts to grow. You hear what we call the Om. You hear the Vroom. That all of a sudden, this mind-body complex starts up. And that's a big thing, that if you really understand that it is not something you believe in, but it is something you have to do, and you try it, and you experience it, then of course it changes everything.
You were talking about energies earlier. So if we use the energies of, the sun, the moon, the planets, that can help us, what you say, hear the Om, hear the Vroom.
Yeah, the whole thing about astrology is the intention of astrology is to give visible form to invisible energies. That what we're trying to do is we're trying to kind of reverse engineer reality. Because reality is multidimensional and things are happening on 3 different levels, that if you use the visible part to give you an understanding of what's going on in this invisible, tangible dimension, the astral plane, the realms of mind and thought, and also to give you some sort of insight into what's going on in this invisible, intangible source, the realms of God, the realms of spirit, the void, the nothing, this non-locality where everything is happening at once. If you understand how that is taking place, and you also understand that we can align ourselves to that part, that as a human being you have this potential to become a whole person, but you are going to need some tools in order to perform the task. It's not something that we don't come in with the programming. It doesn't happen instinctually. that we have to be taught how to do it from those who can do it.
I was wondering if you could take a moment and explain for our listeners what some of the wording means in our description. Like I had described that the moon is conjunct Jupiter and trine Uranus, and then I also said inconjunct Pluto. There might be some people out there who don't really understand that, and I could definitely use a refresher on that as well.
Okay, now these are what in astrology are called aspects. That astrology is basically a mathematical science, and it's all based on the relationship of the position of planets. And, it works with the 360 degrees of a circle, and then it breaks it down into different mathematical angles that they give names to. Mm-hmm. So if you noticed last night, if you looked out and you saw the moon and there was this planet, to the lower left of it, that is called a conjunction. That the moon and Jupiter were in aspect because they were both in the zodiacal sign of Leo. Now, at the time of the full moon, which in Hampton it took place at 6:09 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, the moon was 14 degrees Leo, 48 minutes, and Jupiter was 18 degrees Leo, 0 minutes. So they're within little bit more than 3 degrees of being right on top of one another. If they were in the exact degree and minute, that would be what they call partile. That would be an exact conjunction. But all of these aspects have an orb of activity. And some of them, even as much as 10, 12 degrees on like the Sun and Jupiter, Saturn, you can have a broad range because they're big planets. Mm-hmm. But the aspect of the trine is 120 degrees. So there are other aspects. There's a 60-degree aspect called a sextile. Mm-hmm. There is a 90-degree aspect that's called a square. There's a 120-degree aspect that is the trine, and the inconjunct is a 150-degree aspect. And then, of course, with regard to aspects, you can even take it further. There's what they call applying aspects and separating aspects, which applying aspects have a tendency to be stronger than separating aspects. And the language, if you understand it, so the moon, which is the faster planet between Jupiter and the moon, if the moon is 14 degrees and Jupiter is 18 degrees, Jupiter is actually retrograde, which means it's moving backwards. So they're actually coming closer to partile. That's what they call an applying aspect. If the positions were reversed and Jupiter was 14 degrees going retrograde and the moon was 18 degrees, it would still be a conjunction, but it would be a separating aspect because it's moving away as opposed to moving closer, if that helps you.
Yeah, that's fascinating. We talked about what Leo represents for us. What does Uranus represent for us during this full moon?
Well, you mean Uranus or Aquarius?
Well, I'm just because it's trine Uranus.
Oh, okay. Part of being trine Uranus is one of the reasons why it's significant is because the Sun is in Aquarius. All right, which is 180 degrees, and Uranus is the ruler of Aquarius. So with the Sun being in the zodiacal sign, and then, of course, the ruler being trine, and it's also, Uranus is sextiling the sun, and it is trining the moon. Right? So everything, like we talked last week about Uranus as being the power of the creative principle, the life force, and the whole thing of us being able to overcome this conspiracy that is coming from the lower realms of instinct, appetite, preservation, and survival, so that we can rejoin with this power of the creative principle. That's the myth. So when the aspects are favorable like that, it gives you the opportunity that, provided that you have the tools and you have an understanding of the intention of your practice, then of course it kind of makes the task a little bit easier.
Thank you for that explanation. I think now is a good time to probably take a pause so we can hear a word from our sponsors. So, listeners, we will be with you shortly.
If you are looking for a Samadhi-based experience, IPD Kriya Yoga has the goods. A complete yoga program that includes the practices and the process. Kriya Yoga Series 1 live classes and videos. Get your arms around the spiritual science of Kriya Yoga.
The intention of why we practice is to embody spirit, to feel connected to the life force.
Kriya Yoga Asana live classes and videos. A cosmically engineered system of exercises to initiate apotheosis. A system of exercises engineered for dining and dancing at the Cosmic Ballroom. Kriya Yoga Series 2 live classes and videos. A practice in open form designed to facilitate positive growth of consciousness. Get your Labyrinth video.
I find the positive side of it is it pulls a lot of things together.
Kriya Yoga Mantra and Meditation. With repetition comes absorption. Pray on prana and become divine.
At the same time, we all have unique talents and gifts to give back to the universe.
Private sessions. The mysteries of the universe have always been handed down verbally from teacher to student. Call or click now and get started. 603-929-0303 or www.ipdtransform.com. Namaste.
Welcome back. For those of you just joining us, you are listening to The Voice of Yoga, and we are talking consciousness. So, Swami, the last couple of weeks we've been talking about finding our unique talent and developing that for the collective purpose. So how do you recommend we take advantage of this full moon to do just that?
Well, again, it comes back to having a healthy sense of self. Who am I, and what would my life look like if I was doing exactly what I want to be doing? And again, that's one of the reasons why the practice of yoga is so beneficial with aiding us in being able to make these types of changes. Because like I say, the average person really doesn't get out of infantile defense mechanisms. That the average person is making most of their decisions based on what they think other people want them to do. They're driven by their need for approval. And so the union of the individual with the divine gives the individual internal support. That's what gives you the ability to now separate from this pattern that we come in with. When you have the benefit of internal support, now you can start to make decisions based on what you think works for you, as opposed to what you think other people want you to do. So a big part of developing a healthy ego is answering the question, who am I? And what would my life look like if I was doing exactly what I want to be doing? Because these are things that, like I say, that most of us don't have this in place. Most of us are passively waiting for life to happen to them, as opposed to proactively creating their reality. Now, once you start to develop this healthy sense of self, this ego that is totally established in the forces that are really important to us, that's one of the things that we say. I mean, Kriya Yoga isn't something that's lofty, abstract, otherworldly, and disconnected. You know, we try and use the same terms, but in reality, the pragmatic application of the practice is once an individual stops looking for food, mother, and approval for validation, and now starts to use their number one need, you know, this secret source of sustenance that is invisible and intangible as a symbol for validation, then something magical starts to happen to us. Now, once you have established who you are and what your unique talent is, with an expanded sense of self comes this sense of purpose, because you see yourself in the context of a bigger picture. You know, when the mind is small, we're usually preoccupied with our own pain, pleasure, control dramas. And our perspective doesn't really get out of that limited view. You know, it's all about I, me, mine, as opposed to seeing yourself as an intricate part of something bigger. The expanded sense of self gives you this sense of purpose that transcends personal interest.
So whatever I think, whatever I do, if I put God first, that's what's going to start making these changes.
Well, to answer your question, no. It's not whatever I think and whatever I do. See, the whole thing is that you make the connection. The connection is what gives you power, but you still have the responsibility to create your reality. It's not whatever you think. You have to ask for what you want. You have to consciously start to sculpture your reality. And then, of course, because you have the belief that you're good enough, and you start to emit these thoughts that have the power of intention, then you start to become the creator of your reality. But it's not whatever I think, and all I have to do is put God first, you know, because it's a little bit more complicated than that. You know, that you have to feel good enough. You have to believe that you're good enough. And that's what the internal connection. Once an individual is using what they need, their number one need is a symbol for validation. And I'm not just talking about intellectually, but I'm talking about experientially, where you rebirthed your body in the life force, that your body is a temple and now it has received this inexhaustible source of sustenance. Then the next part of the thing is you've got a mind and you have a responsibility to control your thoughts and start to shape your reality. But once those two things are in place, then of course you're the captain of your ship.
So it really does come down to what we've been saying all along in these shows. How we think is what we become. This is what you're talking about.
Well, yeah, but I mean, it's very different when you are the victim. And of course, your mind is small, and you're shaping your reality from aspects that are outside the scope of perception or power of the conscious mind. So this internal connection is what starts the progressive cycle. So again, there are practices that are designed to do something. There are tools and there are tasks. And the first order of business is, in Kriya Yoga, we call brahmacharya. In your first stage of yoga, yama, your fifth yama is brahmacharya, carrier of Brahman. You have to get this source of sustenance into your body. Matter and mind have to come together with, your number one need. And when you're using what you really do need as a symbol to produce the feeling that you're happy, that you're special, that you're good enough, that's when it starts. Then the rest of it builds from that. But my experience has been is most people are trying to do the yoga without this union. And of course, then it starts to become all about conduct. And it becomes more of a Herculean task rather than a tool to perform a task.
Well, I know we only have a few more moments before we put an end to our program today. Is there anything you'd like to talk to our listeners about with this week's Spiritual Advance?
Well, the Spiritual Advance this week, what we're kind of focusing on is, again, my unique talent. But remember, this is like week 32 weeks into it. So you should, by this time, have figured out who you are and what your life is going to look like when you're doing it. And you're now well on your way of understanding, why did I incarnate? And of course, if you haven't done that preparatory work, then you start right from the beginning. Because again, the theme of this week is you want to be sensitive enough to hear the call and strong enough to walk a solitary path. And so by refining your body and preparing your body for the invocation of the life force into it as a symbol for validation, that will start to give you the strength, that will start to give you the sensitivity. Once you purify your body of all of the noise, all your unnecessary dependencies, then the next order of business is to internalize what you really do need. So, that's, I want to say, the basic gist of this week. But, with that, I'll probably turn this back to you and invite everybody to join our Spiritual Advance. Coming up to the retreat in Costa Rica, which should be quite exciting. And I'll wish everybody a good day. Namaste.
Thank you. And in closing, I invite you listeners out there to please visit our website. You can follow us on Pinterest and Twitter and Facebook. And don't forget, we do have the online classes that are available through the website. They will direct you to a powwow, and you can choose your classes from there. But keep those comments, questions, and curiosities coming. We do enjoy hearing from you. And be sure to tune in next week. We'll be celebrating Valentine's Day Kriya Yoga style. So, Swami, I think now is the time we should end our program. So thank you for listening to the program, Voice of Yoga. I am Lisa Winton. With me, Swami Jayananda, signing off. Have a wonderful Kriya Yoga kind of day. Namaste.